Hello and welcome back to another RiftGuides WildRift video. Today we are going to do something slightly different and we are presenting you a full guide for a new champion that has released recently. We're talking about Twitch here, but before we hop into it, let's talk about a question of the day. What do you think about Twitch so far? Let me know in the comments below. First, let's talk about Twitch as a champion. Twitch is a champion that loves to navigate around the map and gank other lanes. Contrary to other AD carries, Twitch is not really tied down to the laning phase. Most AD carries are usually stuck in lane and farming creeps, whereas Twitch on the other hand, similar to Akshan if played on AD carry, is able to run around the map and go for proactive plays. This is something that many people completely underestimate because they simply forget that Twitch can do this. If you utilize this, you'll have far more success playing Twitch other than just sitting in your own lane. But this is something most of the AD carry players will usually struggle a bit with. To give you a slight better understanding of what Twitch can do, let's talk about his abilities first. Twitch auto attacks apply a passive, and this passive is a poison. This poison deals true damage and scales with ability power. Every auto attack Twitch hits the enemy with applies this poison. Also abilities such as his second ability will apply it, and his ultimate apart auto attacks will also apply it. This ability can be stacked up to a maximum amount of stacks, which we'll talk about a little bit later on because they have value. Once this ability is fully stacked, you'll also receive an attack speed steroid, which you truly need because this champion has barely any attack speed. Twitch's first ability is called Ambush. He becomes Camouflage and Hasted, which means he is running faster. If he's close to an enemy champion, he'll run 3 times as fast as he would normally do. So from a 10% increase to a 30% increase. And obviously, since he's camouflaged, the enemies cannot see him unless he's in a certain range to them. Another thing about this ability is the fact that his passive ability is enhanced by this ability. If Twitch auto attacks you while coming out from this ability, he'll apply 2 instead of 1 stacks. This is going to help him out quite a bit as we go into the later item builds. Another thing about this ability is that it resets upon killing an enemy champion or getting an assist on them, which means that you can continuously chase down enemies or wait for them around the corner or just play around your stealth with a more meaningful sense. Next up comes Twitch's second ability called Venom Cask. This ability is quite an interesting one because we have to think about it from different perspectives here. So you remember that your first ability grants you 2 passive stacks upon hitting an enemy, right? So this ability also applies 1 stack. Contrary to his PC counterpart, this one will not linger on the floor. However, as you throw out the Venom Cask, you are still slowing the enemy for a certain period of time, which is also scaling with AP. Leveling up this ability reduces its cooldown and increases the slow. As you go into the later stages of the game, this slow will become very meaningful and this entire spell will add a nuance to your gameplay. The next ability is his bread and butter and it's called Contaminate. Contaminate works with his stacks. The more stacks the enemy champion has, the more damage they'll be dealt to. Also, there's something very powerful about this ability, and it's about spreading it to other champions. As you stack up the ability or your passive stacks on other champions, triggering this ability will spread this ability to all people around a fully stacked target. This will make it substantially more difficult to fight a Twitch because if you group up, he'll completely demolish you in a short burst series. Both this ability and his passive ability have a bonus scaling when it comes to monsters. Last but not least, we have Twitch's ultimate ability called Spray and Pray. For a certain period of time, Twitch gains attack range and attack damage. In addition to that, his basic attacks will also start piercing enemies and will deal less damage to subsequent targets, but will still apply his passive to all people hit. But now, let's talk about how you combine those things. You want to use your passive ability to get those 2 stacks on an auto attack, pop your ultimate, and then blast down into the enemy team and use your third ability and then bounce again. You don't really want to commit for too long, you want to go for short trades and short burst windows and then re-stealth after a kill and look for a different angle. You're more of an assassin type AD carry and usually not a consistent DPS type of AD carry. However, there are 2 vastly different approaches when it comes to item builds, and they will also influence the way you want to play massively. Let's talk about them. As a starter, I want to say that I don't believe that AD Twitch is any good. AD Twitch really needs a Lulu or any enchanter to be functional, and even then he is just straight up worse than other AD carries that would be played in his stead, for example a Tristana or a Jinx or anything along those lines. AD Twitch however can be played if you're in for the fun, and for the runes therefore you want to go for Lethal Tempo, Vampirism Bone Plating, and Nimbus Cloak. Next to those runes, you want the following items: Storm Razor, Runon's Hurricane, Lord Dominic's Regards, and Infinity Edge. For your last item, you can most of the time choose whatever you need. Any utility-based item or anything that you think is worthwhile, like a Bloodthirster, an Edge of Night, like literally anything you need in this very instance. And obviously you want to top off your build with either a Stasis enchant or a QSS. It really depends on the game. This build and this type of a setup is more DPS oriented, which means you need to have a lot of uptime hitting enemy champions to deal the most damage. Your passive ability on the AD variant of this build will basically do nothing. However, now let's move over to the AP variant. For the AP variant, we have different runes and we can basically run two different setups. For our Keystone, we either take Electrocute or Phase Rush. For our Domination rune, we either take Vampirism or Giant Slayer. For the Resolve tree, it's Bone Plating as always, and for the Inspiration tree, it's either Nimbus Cloak or Hunter Genius. With this build, Twitch will not auto-attack as frequently as with the AD build, and you will never get full stacks of lethal tempo anyway. Therefore, going for this rune doesn't provide you with anything you truly need. On the other hand, going for Electrocute, which will let you play around burst windows, especially during the laning phase and the later stages of the game, will make it easier for you to be piloting your champion. Other than this, Phase Rush will grant you more mobility as you can reset and look for another burst window in an easier fashion, while also reducing your cooldowns and granting you more mobility to run away from any type of threat there is. For the Domination rune, you either want Vampirism for more sustain or Giant Slayer into heavy HP stackers. Resolve tree, Bone Plating as per usual, nothing out of the ordinary, and here for the Inspiration tree we have something that you have to think about. Nimbus Cloak will grant you more in-combat movement speed after using a summoner spell, but if you're already running Nimbus Cloak, this might be a little bit too much and the diminishing return from the movement speed bonus will not grant you too many benefits. However, since your build is literally starving in cooldown reduction or ability haste, Hunter Genius can make it easier for you to find more opportunities in sequence with lower cooldowns, especially since Contaminate is one of your most vital spells you have. For items, we also have a completely different approach here, and here we start with a Nash's Tooth. This item will grant us ability haste, attack speed, and ability power, which is very vital towards what we want to do with our champion. For a second item, here you can go for Liandry's Torment or Rabadon's Death Cap. Whatever you go for, by the way, it's important that you either go Liandry's Torment second or Rabadon's Death Cap second. And after this, you go for the item you haven't built, so either Liandry's Torment or Rabadon's Death Cap. After this, you want the Rift Maker, and then you have a choice what you want to go next. You can either go for a Void Staff if you truly want to empower your Liandry's Torment, or you go for utility items such as a Banshee's Veil or anything that can help you stay alive. Worthy of note though is that Void Staff is not going to help you too much, since most of your damage is either true damage or physical damage, and that's kind of a problem for Twitch. But regardless of this fact, just having more AP is helpful on its own and will help you deal with the enemy team in an easier fashion, but for the way you want to play this champion, it's substantially different from the AD variant. Remember when I talked about the AD variant and I talked about going for either DPS or short burst window? Twitch AP is completely centered around burst windows and burn windows. What is a burn window? So every one of you knows that bursting somebody happens fast, but what is burning? A burning window, or just burning enemy champions, usually is related to Liandry's Torment as an item. This is probably most familiar coming from a Morgana or Lilia. For Twitch, it's also a very special case. If Twitch auto-attacks you once, his passive is applied for 5 seconds. These 5 seconds will apply 8 seconds of Liandry's Torment, which means you have a lot of burn damage over time. And since your passive is scaling with AP and Liandry's is also scaling with AP, you deal a lot of burn damage, which will mean that if you go for a burst window and apply full stacks onto the enemy team and then burn them for 8 seconds, you will see them die over time, which means you can't really go for an all-in, you have to play very smart around cooldowns, which then makes it easier for you to play. One of the most important things here is the fact or the difference between how you want to use your second ability on AD or AP Twitch. AD Twitch uses his second ability just for a slow and an extra stack of anything. Using it also reduces the damage dealt by him because, well, this ability doesn't deal any damage, it only applies a passive stack and a slow, which means he doesn't auto-attack in that time. On the AP version though, it's a little bit different. If you use your typical combo of coming out of stealth and using your ultimate and attacking 3 times, you'll have full stacks on your enemy. Having full stacks on your enemy will allow you to spread your Contaminate or spread with your Contaminate, and then you can do something very specific. What about using your second ability to reset the full stacks on the enemy champions? So instead of only 5 seconds of your passive burn, which equates to 8 seconds of Liandry, you can go for maybe 9 seconds of your passive, which then goes for 12 seconds of Liandry's Torment. Looking at the numbers, that's quite a lot lot of damage, and this burn damage is not to be underestimated as you hit the later stages of the game, which is something you need to go for when you want to play Twitch. Twitch comes online on 2 or 3 items and then becomes a real problem, similar to Morgana. If there was one way or one advice I'd have to give you when it comes to Twitch and getting him through the game, in the early game you have to rely on your brain to get ahead in the form of using your stealth properly and playing around the enemy's inability to understand what you're doing. In the mid game you have to go for certain flanks and traps overall, and in the late game you can just unleash hell into the enemy team, and that's basically going to get the job done. Now let's talk about laning matchups. Twitch doesn't really have a good laning phase, and that's for the fact that he doesn't really have combat abilities but his contaminate ability. Having only one ability and not really having a lot of attack speed makes him very vulnerable during the laning phase, and he gets beaten up by most laners very easily. Especially problematic is the fact that melee supports can take second wind into him, and then the Twitch's poison will just automatically heal them continuously. It's very annoying and very broken. To get the most out of laning, look for stealth opportunities in which you can roam towards mid lane and get somebody killed, or generally just play it slow and scale up safely. With this, you'll get to a point at which you'll be able to carry more consistently. Twitch isn't an early game champion, so don't try to brute force like a Draven. For synergies, I think we have to talk about Yuumi and Lulu the most, and occasionally maybe a Janna. Twitch wants attack speed, be it on the AD or the AP variant, because his attack speed is super low and he barely gets anything from items or anything via level scaling. Having Yuumi's attack speed steroid or Lulu's Ardent's attack speed steroid is going to help you out significantly, and especially gets more stacks onto enemy champions, which will make it way easier for you to pilot your champion during team fights. Yuumi on the other hand also grants you more AP, which will obviously translate into more damage for your passive and your Liandry's Torment. And as for why you want the Janna next to you, Janna can keep you safe from pretty much everything or anyone, and therefore it's pretty nice to have since your champion doesn't have anything to peel for itself, and as a consequence you really need help unless you can decide the fight in an initial opener when the enemy used their cooldowns already. That's basically it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel and come back for more RiftGuides content. See you soon guys.